I can't experience someone fathering me unless I invite them into a place to father.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I see people, they're like, wow, they're not fathering me or they're not mothering me. And I'm like, you're also not giving them an opportunity
It's
to
hard.
speak into your life.
It's hard to father an orphan.
Yeah.
And I think that, and what, to your point that you'll always be a son, I mean, Jesus Christ in Isaiah 6 is called the everlasting Father.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in Matthew and John, Jesus, and Matthew and Luke, God speaks to him from heaven, says, this is my beloved son.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't say this is my beloved Father.
Yeah.
So Jesus is the everlasting Father,
Mm-hmm.
but he's still a son
Yeah.
to another father.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we help you to learn how to be fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. And I'm your host, Kris Vallotton, and today I have Steve Moore.
Hey.
Welcome to Cultural Catalyst.
Thanks for having me.
Steve and his wife, Ruth, are the overseers of our first and second year school, online school ministry. You've worked for us. For how long have you worked for Bethel? Since the dinosaurs?
Worked for 9 years, been here for 12, did 3 years of the school ministry, and then, 8 years, because I took a year off.
Yeah. And then you became leaders. Now you guys launched the online school. Was that like 3 years ago?
Yeah.
We got 800 students online right now.
Yeah.
Graduated hundreds and hundreds of students.
About 1,000.
How many countries are we touching? Do you know with online? Right now, currently, like if
currently right now, I don't know. I know from the past we've had 78 countries come through, and some of those like blacklisted countries that you have to hide your IP address and all that stuff just to do it.
And then
cool.
the demographic of people, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Everywhere from very poor people,
China, Taiwan,
people in the jungles
Australia.
of Africa, though,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like very rural Africa, all the way to scientists at NASA.
Yeah.
Did you tell me that the other day?
Yeah. People in Space Force, CEOs, presidents of schools.
All going to school ministry.
All going to school ministry.
Oh, that is just amazing.
Pretty humbling. So.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk a little bit about you.
Yep.
Okay, you're married. Tell us a little bit that story.
Yeah. So I met my wife at the school of ministry, so Ruth. So
can we stop this for just a minute?
We can stop and just thank the
Listen,
Lord. Listen,
you need a mate. Think BSSM school ministry. You can still sign up.
Especially if you're a guy, because
Come on.
A good ratio.
There's
good chances.
2 girls for every boy. There it is, right there. Guys, if you can't find your woman at school ministry, it's like fishing at the hatchery. Literally,
it really is.
And you met. See, right here, just a testament right there.
So I met her. She was a year old and the year above me.
Year above you.
And she's older than me, so I married up. So
you did too.
Yeah.
She's
and
beautiful
so
too.
we were friends for my first year, and then a year in, I was like, "What am I doing?
Exactly.
This girl's amazing."
From England.
Yeah. I asked her on a date and dated for a year, and then got engaged for 7 months, which was far too long.
I know.
And then
it's torture.
It was torture. Yeah. And then been married. So got married in 2014. So coming up on 8 years.
Okay, I know this is her story, but I have told this story probably 30 times.
Yeah.
Your wife
was in a wheelchair
for
5.5 years
because she had
ME, and I cannot pronounce the long name.
I know.
She can pronounce it, so I'm not going to do it justice. But yeah, so she, when she was 15, she was actually semi-professional in tennis, played a lot of tennis, was sponsored on the circuit, and then got really sick. She thought she was going to get better, but didn't. Had to use a wheelchair to get around the house, had to have her parents cut up her food for her, brush her hair, people to take notes for her at school. Would spend months on end in bed in pain. And 5.5 years later, she was at a meeting with a lady called Heidi Baker.
Oh, yeah. We know that woman.
She got a hug from Heidi, and she said she just felt something lift off of her. And she stood up out of her chair, and this song, Taste and See That the Lord is Good is on. And that was the first song she stood up, and it was the first time she stood up in 5.5 years with no pain, no fatigue, just crying, got her life back. Next day, started going on the streets and seeing people healed herself. And
I don't know if you know this, but Heidi Baker got healed herself of ME. Did you know that?
Yep. She had it for 10 years.
Yeah.
So even longer.
Ruth had it for 5.5.
Yeah, 5.5. And so that was kind of a bonding too, because I was supernaturally healed. So I had a bad sports injury, and then Banning actually called me out in a meeting of 1,500 people.
Wow.
I actually had a hangover. It was a wayward season. It was a prodigal son story.
Not a Holy Spirit hangover?
No.
You weren't like hanging over, like
no.
staying after the glory?
No. Basically, my grandpa bought me a ticket to this Jesus Culture event, wired me the money to go. I'm like, I'm not going. And just out of honor and respect for him, I went, but I was supposed to go that night, but it was dollar draft night at the casino. And so I did that, and I drove up hating life because I was in so much pain and everything. But he called me out in a meeting, and he said, there's someone here. You had a sports injury in your shoulder, kept on like dislocating or something like that over and over again. Doctors try to fix it. If that's you, can you stand up? And I was the only person to stand up out of 1,500 people. No one laid hands on me, but I just felt this intense heat, almost like fire on my body. And then my shoulder started moving around on the inside. It was the most bizarre thing ever. My hangover left, started crying, and got completely healed.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so that was kind of a connection point of our stories together. And so
you married a supernatural wife.
Oh, totally.
Had a supernatural experience and got supernaturally healed.
Oh yeah.
And gave your life to a supernatural God.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that was definitely a defining moment for me that kind of changed everything. And then I got a hold of the Jesus Culture book, and he talked about the school of ministry in there, and I was like, there's a place where people like this exist. I was like, I need to go there. So then I came, did 3 years of school, and then came on staff. And
you were a sports guy. You were actually a professional coach. Isn't that true?
Yeah, so I did some coaching with Ohio State for 3 years, and that was kind of it was while I was still in university, actually. So you weren't getting paid. I was paid and everything. They paid very well there. Yeah. But basically from May through September, while I was on my summer break within college, I was with the team, helped run camps, helped do trainings and conditionings and all that kind of stuff. And
that's so amazing.
So did that for 3 years, and then right after that, I came out here, and so that was all during that time. And so,
you, Steve, and Ruth are two of our strongest leaders in our whole environment. And there's, we have 8,000 people in our church probably at this point. Hundreds of staff, over 7. I guess I heard a number yesterday.
We just cracked 800, yeah.
800 staff, and I have so much respect for you, and our team has so much honor for both you and Ruth. And watching you, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been so much. Like you most improved player. Like you guys have really elevated, especially, Ruth too, both of you. And when I was writing the Uprising book, I was talking about fatherlessness, and I was talking about how do people get well. And I was sharing a story. I was thinking of stories in which God broke insecurity, false identity, all these things that men and women, but especially men, face. Mm-hmm. And I told your story, how you came into staff meeting, and I don't really want to tell a story. I want to let you tell a story, but yes. I'll set up the scene. We're in staff meeting where really we're mostly doing business.
Yeah. And
we always start out with some testimonies, stories, just like, hey, how's it going? What's the good news? And people are sharing the good news, and we're all like, that's amazing, that's awesome, and it's kind of it's a high energy very encouraging. We do it from anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, even depending on what the meeting's like. And and there's about anywhere from 70 to 120 of our staff are in these meetings.
Yeah.
And that was going on, and then it was like we were maybe 15 minutes into these great stories, and you raised your hand, and Dan called on you, and do you remember that story?
Yeah. I mean, it was prefaced by kind of an experience I had. I'm going to get the timelines wrong.
Yeah, that's
I'm not very good with dates, but probably a couple weeks prior, it was in January of 2021.
Yeah.
And we had just started a new onboarding for our online school.
Mm-hmm.
So for those, we kind of started in the fall. We started in January, and so we had a new intake of students. And so I'm, as the senior overseer of the school, I'm going to introduce everybody for worship and all this kind of stuff. And so, and it's live. So we have people on there live.
Yeah.
You have anywhere from 300 to 600 and some people on
just
live.
To be clear, you're leading the class.
Oh, yeah.
This is the first day of school or the second day of school.
Yeah, it's the first day of school for probably about 200 people.
Got it.
But we have another 500 that have been doing school.
Yeah,
we have the production guys there, and they're like 3, 2, 1, and you're live. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they said we're live, I don't know what happened. Still, I don't really know what happened. It's hard to process, understand. But basically, it was almost like I couldn't speak or I couldn't move. And I just became overwhelmed with God. I was just this overwhelming sense of the presence of God. And then I heard him speak to me. He said, "Steve, are you trying to protect your name or are you trying to protect my name?" And when he hit that, and let me just preface this, when I came to Bethel and I was seeing people experience God and stuff, I was like, what is going on? Because I'm Southern Baptist boy.
So emotional.
I'm my background's Southern Baptist boy, Father, Son, Holy Bible. I have no grid for any of that kind of stuff. So when I came in, that kind of stuff, I always refer to myself, I really am an oak of righteousness. You know? It wasn't I wasn't the person they go down. If someone, if I was in a charismatic meeting, I'd be like, try not to, have anything happen to me. But so when he spoke that to me, I fell over. I don't know what happened, but I was just on the ground. But it was
spontaneous, right? That wasn't
spontaneous, not planned. Nothing was happening in the room. No one was doing no one was praying or anything. Literally, it's just 3, 2, 1, and we're live. And so it's first time experience with these students, and I'm sitting there honestly panicking a little bit. And then he spoke that thing, and then I'm on the ground. And I don't really remember what happened then. My team said I was on the ground for 2 hours, which is not my normal deal by any means.
Did somebody come up and lead the meeting?
Yeah, someone came up and just took the mic, kind of stood over top of me, did it, and then took him into worship. And but I'd realized in that moment that I had subconsciously began making decisions involving my team, involving my personal life, my family life, for the church, that were subconsciously I was trying to protect my name with things. Yeah. And kind of my background is I'm kind of I like to be all things to all people, So, and a lot of that was rooted out of fear of inadequacy or acceptance or those things. So I would try to I wanted people to like me was my thing. And so when that happened, it felt like something broke in me where I became aware of I've been making a lot of this stuff about me. And here I am leading a school of 800 ministry students at the time and a staff of 30 and all this stuff. And so it was kind of it was another come to Jesus moment, but it was more like a recalibration for me. And so it was from that where God was just putting on his finger and basically just breaking my fear of being misunderstood or being labeled as weak. And
2 weeks later, we're in the meeting sharing
testimonies.
Yeah.
And I feel like God's you need to share this testimony of what happened to you. And I'm
which is a little different than
the vibe of the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody else is yeah, and I'm I got my behind spanked in front of a bunch of people. That was kind of the shift. And so I just kind of opened up about this encounter, and And kind of personally growing up, and this has been true since I can remember, my greatest fear in life has been that my name wouldn't be remembered. And
Wow.
And so I kind of had this realization where, God was really speaking to me. He's like, Steve, you can't be fully loved unless you allow yourself to be fully known. And I had realized there was areas in my life where, like, my wife knew me. That was about it. Like, honestly, if I'm just being real, like, even some of my best, closest friends, I wasn't fully known to anyone.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I just felt like the Lord is just like, I want you to share this. And so I kind of opened up and shared that, and shared my greatest fear, and shared just kind of how I have a fear of my name not being remembered, but also that I'm not going to measure up, that I'm going to miss the mark, that I feel out of my depth from, like, in this situation. And
you remember you sharing how one of the things that really struck me in the midst of all those leaders who you are respected and revered, you were sharing how inadequate you felt,
mm-hmm.
and how you came to every meeting feeling like, I don't belong here. And then you had that encounter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so for me, it was just like the Lord, like, hey, you can pretend that this isn't there, but it's going to stay there, or we can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kind of like that thing is like, you can keep going around the mountain if you want, but that mountain's never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that's always going to be an issue. And so for me, Ruth and I, our big priority is family, kids, legacy. Like, what are we passing on to them? And so for me, I'm like, I want to be the biggest version of myself, so that I can model something for my kids, so they're not trying to take some of my junk that I have that's not good. And obviously, we're all human, so they're going to get some of that stuff, but maybe not. But so for me, it was just kind of this place of like, I'm no longer going to let fear of what other people think about me hold me back from stepping into what God has for me. And so that was kind of, I felt like that was a moment where God was just like, okay, let's see if you're really, is this about your name or is this about my name? Let's actually see. It sounds weird, but like, he's so kind. So I'm not like, he's testing you, but there is this thing where it's like, it felt like this, okay, let's see if this is actually taking root. And honestly, I've been different since. Like, my wife will even tell you, for the last, January, so year and a half, I've been a different human since then. And
interesting. So you stood up and did that in tears.
Mm-hmm.
And took you a little while just to get past your tears that day. And then, I'm like, well, I was about to say, let's pray for you. And then before you could finish, someone else stood up and said, I'm having the same experience.
Yeah.
And then somebody else, and someone else, and someone else. And I don't remember how many, but probably at least 10 of our leaders stood with you and said, I'm having that same experience. I've never told anyone about what I'm experiencing in this room. I feel inadequate. I feel like I don't belong here. I feel like I'm going to be discovered as a phony and a fake. And we ended up with a real Holy Spirit moment.
Yeah, it was powerful.
People on the ground weeping, and just other leaders just praying for them, for that to be broken off. And our team, I would say our team bonded in a way that definitely has never happened before.
Yeah. No, it's true. Things have felt different, and you can even tell in meetings past that there's just been more permission, I guess, would be how I describe it. People feeling more permission to be real, authentic, to come as a son and a daughter in front of dads. Because there's you and Dan and Kathy, dads and moms in that room. It can be intimidating, because you want to make your dad proud. You want to make your mom proud. And so it can be intimidating to go, I don't feel like I'm hitting the standard of what mom and dad are expecting of me. You know?
You're not the only one, because, to be honest, there are times I walk in that room, and I've been leading this group of people for 24 years, and wonder, is it time to retire? Is it time to be done? Do these guys want me done? Does anybody really fall in me? And so, I think that these fears on different levels are common to people and leaders.
Yeah.
And why do you think that sharing these lies and the shame, being authentic, why do you think it's important?
Well, it's important because I'll go back to what I said before. You can't experience the fullness of love from someone unless you allow someone to fully know you and see you. So if you don't allow yourself to be fully known, basically you're just like a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and you can pour, no matter how much love you pour in there, it's just going to leak out. You're not going to really receive it. Yeah. Because and this happens deep in our subconscious, that we're not even aware of these things, but there is that deep-seated thing where you go, but if you knew this, if you knew this,
you wouldn't like me.
Yeah, you wouldn't like me. Or you would think different of me, or you'd think poorly of me in that area. And I think I came to grips with, we're so scared to admit that we're not perfect. I'm like, that's the whole reason why Jesus had to come.
Exactly.
I'm like, we all miss the mark.
Totally.
And we're scared that we're like, maybe no one else is missing the mark. I'm like, bro, we all get it wrong. And so for me, it's just so important because you actually get to experience the fullness of everything that God has for you if you allow yourself to be fully seen and transparent, and you're free in the place that you never have to feel like you have to wear a mask again. Yeah. And I think that's what felt true to me, is it felt like I wore a mask. Yeah. Of a mask of, I'm going to put on a reflection that I think you want to see. Yeah. And because of that, I didn't have true joy or happiness in my life. I didn't feel fully fulfilled, really. Like, there was moments of joy and things, and I felt fulfilled in other areas. But in terms of work, I didn't feel fulfilled in that moment. And honestly, I can tell you, since that, like Ruth will tell you, she's like, you're a different human. Like, I have been, and we've gone through stuff. There's been a lot of interesting stuff and hard things.
Yeah,
but
you have.
But I have found, honestly, crazy joy and excitement, and my outlook on life has completely changed from that. Yeah. And honestly, I do attribute it to allowing myself to be known. And that's my heart for everyone, and that's my heart for our team and for our students. And so as a leader, I'm continually coaching them and casting vision of the importance of being authentic and being known and being real.
Yeah, I always say I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not.
Oh, that's such a good word.
Because the truth is that when you pretend, you always feel like a fake and a phony. And you're always concerned that someone's going to turn over that leaf, open that door at the wrong time, discover you in your secret place and go, that was what I was in love with. That's not who's real. That's not who you are.
It's true.
And famous, I think she's a psychologist, Brene Brown, said that we are all neurobiologically wired for a connection. And then she said the greatest enemy of connection is shame. And she said you break shame by being authentic. Yeah. In fact, it's called The Power of Vulnerability, if anyone wants to watch it on TED Talk. Your journey in discovering how to live as a son. How do you step into fatherhood and leadership role and still remain a son? Because you're a father now. You've got 3 kids.
Well, a third on the way. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we count them right now.
Yeah.
And but you're never going to lose being a son as you become a father.
Totally.
How do you remain? What's a journey look like in being a son? We have a lot of men and women who will be watching this podcast and. How do I remain a son?
Yeah, I mean, I think humility and teachability are at the foundation of those things. I think, I'm an achiever by nature, so
we have that in common.
Yeah, so I ashamedly admit I'm driven by status or hitting the mark in certain things, and so I have to protect myself against that to make sure I'm doing things from the right motive. But when it comes to maintaining a son, is one, I have an amazing dad on earth.
You do.
So I I feel greatly privileged with that. I had a dad that never missed a sporting event, never missed anything that I did, would fly back from California to Ohio just to catch a basketball game, or, I loved my dad. He's my hero to this day. And I think the thing that impacted me so much was so many times throughout my life where I had missed the mark, where I had done some stupid stuff, or I had done some stuff that I was ashamed of. And his affirmation of my identity never changed.
Yeah.
Like, that didn't mean,
he
didn't discipline me or something like that, but like he really instilled belief and confidence in who I was called to be, a man of character, integrity. And so maintain that place of son, honestly, like being a son to my dad, which I know that I have unique privilege. That's not everybody's experience,
exactly.
right? So I feel
not
very
in this world.
Yeah, totally. So I feel very blessed to have that experience. But from that, I know what it felt to be in that place. And so for me, I'm like, oh man, it was the greatest gift in my life to be able to have a dad that I could actually do life with, that I could have confidence to go before and, just have that place. And so for me growing up, I'm like, oh, if I take everything in the perspective of leadership too, because I'm really passionate about leadership.
Yeah.
My personal goal is I want to be the greatest leader in the world, and so I'm just continually striving for this. And so for me, I'm like, oh, the best leaders are the best students. They're the people that are remaining teachable, constantly learning, never being satisfied, always looking to move forward. And I want to live my life in this example. And so for me, I'm like, if I'm raising up future leaders, I want to teach them that to be a great leader, you have to go to the lowest of the low, and that means taking on humility, taking on submission under different people and authorities, and recognizing that you don't have all the answers, that you see the world through a certain lens and you might not be seeing it the right way. And so I know I'm dancing around it a little bit.
I think it's great.
For me, it is so important that we understand that we never outgrow being a son or a daughter, because like, the role of a father is to, one, love us, believe in us, and raise us up in the way that we should go, right? And so if he's our father, and we can't we're not going to outgrow him in terms of age. We're always going to be that place. So for me, I'm like, he's always going to be my dad. So in that respect, like the way that I allow father, like, I'll put it this way, I can't experience someone fathering me unless I invite them into a place to father.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I see people, they're like, wow, they're not fathering me, or they're not mothering me. And I'm like, you're also not giving them an opportunity
it's
to
hard,
speak into your life.
It's hard to father an orphan.
Yeah.
And I think that, and what, to your point that you'll always be a son, I mean, Jesus Christ in Isaiah 6 is called the everlasting Father. Mm-hmm. And yet in Matthew and John, Jesus, and Matthew and Luke, God speaks to him from heaven, says, this is my beloved Son. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say this is my beloved Father. Yeah. So Jesus is the everlasting Father, but he's still a son to another Father. Mm-hmm. I think it's so beautiful, but I do think what you said is so real, because we live in the most fatherless generation in the history of the world, in which our fathers are alive but not home. And what's happened, as you know, because we're in the midst of trying to help solve this problem, is that we end up with like even the church is like a global orphanage. Mm-hmm. It's full of bastards and not sons and daughters. And so oftentimes we're trying to bring fathering or family principles to an orphan, in which they don't actually know how to receive love. And I think that what you shared 10 minutes ago is so powerful, because you actually answered the question, like, how do I go from being an orphan to a son?
Yeah. And it's like in Philippians 2, I think it's 6, or it's around that address, where it's just talking about, humility is considering others as greater than yourselves.
Yes.
So it's not looking down on yourself, it's not beating yourself up, but it's looking around and recognizing the gifting and call that God has put on different people in you. And what it does, it allows you to receive people in a greater way. It allows me to receive from anyone. I remember years ago, in the school ministry, we have a third-year program, which is kind of like an internship, mentorship program. And so Ruth and I have taken on a lot of third-year students that have done life with me. And one year we had a guy who was 67 years old applying to do a third year with Ruth and I. And this guy...
Just a little older than you.
Just a little older than me. He was one of the wealthiest men in the South, had the second largest lumber company in the world, had this large real estate business, taught at generals at West Point guerrilla warfare. At one point in time was the leading commander in Vietnam of every troop that went in and out of Vietnam for 6 months. Like, this guy's like sitting in this interview. He's like, can I intern for you? And I'm like, can I intern for you?
Exactly.
Like, that's honestly what I'm doing. And so we just had an honest conversation. I was like, I don't want to waste your time. Like, I'm just being real. Like, I don't know what benefit we would be to you for a year of you giving your life for that. And he goes, look, he's like, I have a core value that I can learn from anyone. He's like, I don't care if you're 2 or 102. Wow. I can learn from you.
That's so
And he
beautiful.
said, in this year, all I want to grow in and learn is how to hear God's voice and how to pray for the sick. And he's like, if it just means me hanging around you and sweeping the floors, that's what I'll do. And I remember that moment, I was like, this guy is a dad. He has a bunch of kids, but he's 67 years old, and he still is a son. Like, he positioned himself to be a son, even me, which at the time I was like, this is years ago. So 29 years old or 30 years old. And I remember being so struck by that moment where I was like, oh man, that's what it means to be a son.
Wow.
Is to allow, no matter someone's background or upbringing or education or geographic location, there's something that we can extract from all of us.
Wow.
And I think that's the very nature of a son. It's this place of humility, is considering others as greater than yourselves. And it's huge for us.
We just pray for us for a minute.
Yeah. So Holy Spirit, I ask right now for anyone watching, anyone listening to this right now, Father, that you would just come the same way you came with me, Father, that you would just release grace and rest over us right now to be able to receive you as our dad.
So good.
And Father, I thank you just for the gift of humility coming on us right now, that we'd be humble enough to be able to recognize the calling and gifting in others.
So good. Yes, Lord, thank you so much. If this conversation's impacted you, I really want to encourage you to sign up for our Father series in partnership with our new book, Uprising. I just finished this book actually finished it about a year ago. It comes out October 25th. I have this notes down. It's called Uprising, the epic battle for the most fatherless generation in history. And we did a 5-part video series featuring stories of hope around the fatherless generation. And so you can learn more about it at www.theuprisingbook.com. Let me do that again, www.theuprisingbook.com. And you can join this 5-part video series. I think you're going to really love it. I think you're going to love the book. Steve, thank you so much for being on. Thanks so much for your transparency.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so honored to have you on, and I'm so honored to have you on our team. God bless you.
Love you.
Well, see you next week. God bless you all.